everyone, Joe here from ActionX, and welcome to What's on the Two, where it's our show where we review things in the world of television. Most times now we are doing episode by episode reviews of new seasons of television airing right now, or sometimes we do these very special seasonal reviews where it essentially is, sometimes they drop a whole season to binge, sometimes they have a much more slower burn. And I decided, you know what? Let me hold off on it. Let me just build it up. Let me get the tension going. Let me see how it goes. And last year, ladies and gentlemen, if you were unaware, if you were living under a rock, probably one of the best adult animated series of all time. Not even really adult, but like has some adult humor. King of the Hill returned after being canceled because the Cleveland show was the hot thing. They were trying to franchise Family Guy. It failed epically, and now they're trying to do it again. I think next year or this year. I think it's next year. The Stewie spinoff. Regardless of that, that's how old I am. They canceled it for that, and all this time we've waited and waited and waited, and we got to see it again. To relive it. Shout out to Hulu, which technically is owned by Disney, so technically shout out to Disney for bringing back some nostalgic feelers, just the king of it. And King of the Hill was one of them. And last year, I labeled season 14, the revival season, a near masterpiece. It was very much a near masterpiece in my heart. And the fact that, since it wrapped, I had rewatched it again, I think in the lead up to that review that I did. And then I rewatched it, not even now to lead up to what we're doing today. It literally was just like, I was in the mood just to watch that season independently. It just served as a really good, very weird on-jump point for new fans. Obviously it would be much more clever to watch the first 13 seasons, which I know like some people can, some people won't, but it's worth the binge, and season 14 was definitely worth the binge. Since we had that announcement, since we had that review, Hulu announced, hey, we're not only going to give you season 15, which is technically the second half of the 20 episodes they ordered when this entire revival news came out, but they also renewed it for a 16th and a 17th season, which means we are going to get 2 more years of King of the Hill, which again, 10 episodes, you know what, at the end of the day, I'll take what I can get. Because to jump into this, season 15, it was kind of this a very random, I nearly forgot it was happening, and then when I was reminded of it, I was like, oh yes, more King of the Hill, absolutely. The fact that I'm an adult, like the thing is, I'm an adult now. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm only 28, but like I'm an adult, and I'm clamoring for King of the Hill. I was like, new King of the Hill episodes. Like, where am I in my timeline right now that we can even say that, or we can do that? And honestly, I had some, to get into now properly, I had some nicks and picks with season 14 last year, and I still called it a near masterpiece. I still kind of dinged it for its nicks and picks, and I don't think any show's perfect, and that's kind of where I go with it. This season is not perfect. This is not a perfect season, but it is another almost near masterpiece. I give it a little bit shy under season 14, but there was a little bit more of the, yeah, I kind of can get where this is going. I kind of feel what they were trying to achieve with this year specifically. Obviously it's the second half of the original 20, so technically this is like mainly the big season they were planning it out. This is essentially season 14 part 2, but yeah, they're classifying as season 15. It's just a natural extension of it. And honestly, again, in modern television trope, even if you have a small episode count, you still want to give the audience a sampler platter. And one of the things I loved about the original, like the first 5-6 years of King of the Hill, is that there was a very, very, very loose story. There was continuity. There was a storyline building in the episode where like this was referred here and this would come back over here. Obviously, the latter half of the series kind of fell off on that. They were just kind of trying to be more of a traditional adult animation show, like Family Guy and American Dad, Simpsons that were running at the time alongside it, and I, as much as I, still love the characters, and I still love the adventures and shenanigans to get into, it really was that loose story that, like, it was, like, kind of like the characters were evolving. They were kind of, even at their age, for most of them, especially with with the original adults now becoming more seasoned, as I like to call them, they're still learning. We're still getting to know a little bit new things with them, and even after having done an original 13-year run and now a revival season, there's still so much you can do with those characters. And I think that's where the 10 episode order kind of assists it, where like we're able to kind of tell these new types of stories. It still feels fresh now that we're in the second year of this, and it still feels like if this was attached to the season 14 episodes last year, I think honestly it worked so well in the synergy fortune of it that really I was very much like, all for it. And this is obviously, again, just how television goes. We're like, you're building it up now. You're, obviously, they probably wrote this in a way where like, yeah, we're kind of going to have a little bit of a time jump. We're going to get a little bit more, deeper into things. We're like, some time has passed already. The whole, like, we're back together. That's kind of already been over. And honestly, I kind of really felt that in the season 14 finale, which honestly, now looking back on it, it didn't really feel like a finale. It felt more like just the ending of this batch of episode. This felt like the continuation of it, where we had a good amount of like, we are establishing King of the Hill in this new world. We're continuing that. We're continuing for them to tackle on these new things that weren't around when the original run happened. And I think honestly that's kind of like, I guess the cheap thing for a nostalgic revival to do is like, oh, here are these OG characters that work so well in this time period. Let's have them react and really like get into all the nuances of this new world. But on top of that, we're still kind of, having benchmarks to how we started, to how we originally went. And honestly, I was a little lamented, that a couple episodes into the season, I'm like, okay, well, I might end up scoring this a whole point below the last time I was here. But by the time we wrapped it up, I'm like, no, this is how they're going to do it. And honestly, I thought of this when I was walking home yesterday, even when I'm recording this review. I very much had a thought like, if this revival King of the Hill ends, I mean, hey, and minor spoilers, like 10-15 years from now, if they do a spin-off with not spin-off, a continuation with Bobby and Connie and their kid, I mean, honestly, like just the way they've kind of been working with even the younger characters that we had last time, now they're adults, they're setting them up in a way where like, they're growing up, they're becoming more and more responsible. And I think this season showcases that very much, that through line of, growing up, specifically, whether it is, Bobby and his friends or now Hank and his friends. Like, you get to really see that there's an evolution, that like, they're still their same core self, but they are evolving to kind of what the next thing is going to be. And I feel like this time around, we got a little bit more into the cadence of like focusing on just the Rainy Street folks, and of course Bobby's new corner of Texas, and I think that was a little bit more of the primary focus. Where like last time, yeah, we're just setting up these new little corners of the niche by trying to introduce a bunch of new characters that are going to be part of things. But like, this year was more like, let's take a little pause with that. Let's kind of just go back to some of the real, the people that people really want to see. No offense to who they were crafting last time around. I'm not trying to really harp on them that much, but it's just I am really here to see Hank and Bobby, and they're now two completely separate corners, and how do they sometimes interact. And I feel like there was like moments here where like I honestly was confused. I'm like, damn, like, are we really, like, it feels like we haven't seen them in a while, but I'm like, no, they've been together that often. It's like, it works so seamlessly that even in these 10 episodes they feel much longer than they will. And before I get a little bit more deeper into spoilers, I very much enjoyed the 15th season. I think it's worth the binge. I binged this in 2 days, so for timeline purposes, it came out on the 20th, so I finished it on the 21st. So just, it just speaks to how, how much I love for this show, and, just, how, subverting expectations of like, I think I wasn't going to like this episode, and boom, I loved it. Or like, this is like, oh my God, this is speaking to me. This is relating to me. And then, you're obviously getting your nostalgic bombs, and, obviously, I think it's still not perfect. There's a couple moments throughout the season, same with last time, where I felt like they kind of like it fell a little flat short. I don't think it exactly was an episode that we need. But then when you really think about it, I'm like, what, it is what it is. But it's still the characters that are entertaining. It's still that really truly felt like this was worth the binge, essentially speaking. But to go into deep in it, and before I go any further, yeah, I will be spoiling a ton of from season 15 of King of the Hill, which is now streaming only on Hulu via Disney Plus. So, please go support it, go watch it so we can get even more seasons past the 16th and 17th. Let's get to season 20. Let's get to season 20, guys. Let's do it. But with that being said, going into season 15, again, I had only just watched season 14 not long ago. And there's not like really much of a through line. And I think, when we going back to like the serialization of King of the Hill, hey, every episode matters. Like, whether it's in the background or whether it's in the foreground, everything part of play is at work here as Hank and Peggy continue their retirement, their golden years essentially. Which honestly, like in terms of that, we really don't get too much into that this year. I mean, I feel like every episode last time was kind of like hampering on the aspect of like Hank and Peggy are back, they're retired, this is their new life, their new status quo. And, how are they going to fill that time? We don't really get too much of that this specific year. It's more like them kind of like already having mastered that and kind of like now really looking at like the larger world as it was. Like, again, going back to like, some of those early season 14 episodes where like we are really reacting to how the world has changed. We've kind of taken a little bit of like some stopgaps then and there. But here it's like, it's back in the forefront, like, Hank dealing with electric vehicles or marijuana legalization in some states in the country. Having to go through, still dealing with like these new lines of business, and I'm just trying to like rapid fire some of those things, and but still being his core self at the end of the day. I think one thing that I got touched on when it came to like upgrading from the old to the new, not in that way, but like it just felt right, was the second episode where Hank and Peggy briefly adopt a dog, well, no, not adopt, foster a dog, and it was just meant to be temporary, but then Hank builds up that bond with him, and he's like, oh my god, I think I was wrong. I think we need to keep this dog, and the whole journey of it, and it suddenly became a very loose Ladybird episode, where that was something that we barely got a reference to last time, and I kind of mentioned that in the review. Like, I feel like there were certain things, certain characters that we didn't even get to touch upon, and of course, like I was an idiot because like, hey, we are still recording, we are still making the second half of the season, so you're gonna get that, and we did get that, and I think. Just seeing that, like, you just realize, oh yeah, Ladybird was such an important part of the life, and I as soon as like if the timeline makes any sense when we're wrapping this up, it makes it all the more disappointing and more saddening about it. And I guess that's another thing. Like I'll get to in a second, but like the King of the Hill timeline is kind of all over the place a little bit now, where like it makes sense, but at the same time it doesn't. And I'll explain why in a second, but like even that episode is like a really hit, and I really fell for it. But talking about that, just about time and everything, obviously it's a cartoon show, so am I really gonna go that deep into like a cartoon animated series timeline? Yes, I am, because like the fact is, like, yeah, of course, like the prime 6 seasons, the first 6 seasons were the prime years of King of the Hill. Those were the ones that the creators truly worked on. They worked on it for a long time. They really wanted to make sure that this stands out better than any other TV show that you could watch at the time period, and they did that. But at the same time, it's like, like obviously we gotta have some callbacks to like the later seasons. They still count. So I'm like, timeline wise, like. The confusing thing is when they did the episode where they do the little church retreat for a couples counseling seminar with, ironically, Dale and Nancy being the ones chaperoning. Again, knowing their history, it's like, I mean, yeah, they're a unique couple in their own right, but like them really like talking about trust and commitment. I mean, and Nancy, what's wrong with you? But the thing that I found weird about it is that and I guess this is my one I guess my only nitpick with it is that the timeline makes no sense. And I mean, and obviously they could probably address it down the road. Sadly we did lose a couple of amazing voice actors during the making of these 2 seasons. Jonathan Joss specifically, who played John Redcorn. I'm confused by it. Like, like they had a very satisfying ending to it. We had a whole episode where like Nancy renewed her vows with Dale to like, restart their marriage. And then it's implied subtly that, Nancy and John were hooking up again on the side. And I'm like, what the fuck happened? Like, part of my friends were like, what happened? Like, weren't you guys good? Like, wasn't there, like, not there to be a reason for, John to be hooking up with Nancy again? And of course, obviously, there was still a mini time jump, so anything could happen. Maybe Nancy just got bored or something, and they started working together again. Maybe, like, the passion re-sparked and everything. And I know people are going to say, like, oh, there was that one episode with Nancy briefly considering it again, and then when she was losing her hair originally, and her mom said like the only solution is to basically bang someone that's not your husband, bang someone that have an affair, or that the excitement is going to keep your. I never knew what was up with that, but the point I'm trying to say is that they went back to it. That's they applied it. They're back to it. Like, I know there was like jokes and everything. I literally thought that was just like humor towards the past, but now it feels like, oh no, they hooked up again. And like, yeah, the opening kind of implies that, but I'm like, I was also thinking that was just like a tongue in cheek to the original show. Like, just like, yeah, remember this scene, like, in the original theme song? Yeah, there you go. Like, it's a little callback. So I'm like, I'm confused by the timeline. And then you have Ray Roy, who was a late character from all the way towards the end of the original run. Like, he comes back in, and I'm like, and I'll get to that episode in a second. I think that's a masterpiece episode, but all in all, it's like the timeline is confusing. It really, really is. And then goes back to the Ladybird thing where, like, again, when we talk about that masterpiece of the finale, you have Lady Burke still alive, and then obviously in episode 2 of this season she passes away at some point, so that means that Hank and Peggy weren't even there when Lady Bird passed away, and I highly doubt she would have jumped on a plane all the way to an international continent. So I'm just so confused by it. But again, it's just me being a nitpicker for whatever the case might be, and this entire season, of course, going back to, obviously we're talking about Hank, we're talking about Peggy, we're talking about all the OG adults that we kind of fell in love with, obviously Bobby and his friend circle, now considering it his girlfriend Connie, and his bro Joseph. I will say this season they kind of shaft Joseph a little bit, which I'm like, I'm not the biggest fan about. Like, considering my name, my real name, I don't feel that appreciated. But honestly, they kind of refocus the dynamics of the Bobby side of the story to just him and Connie now, which I'm like, I think it works at the end of the day. And I think honestly, them getting their second go around this time, people always said like, sometimes you find the right person, it's just not the right time. Now they're at the right time. They really work well together, and everything. And I think looking back on it, like season 14 kind of felt like a detour for Connie's character. Now going back to like her just wanting to be a traditional girlfriend, which I feel like it was just like a subtle thing. Like she just needed that, that a real commitment partner, considering the fact of everything that her parents have kind of went for, which I honestly, another thing I forgot to mention was the whole thing they handled with the Super Nuisance Force divorce. I think honestly is a very natural, very organic, yet very relatable to that. Thankfully, I'm not even married yet, but I hope I never go for a divorce. But what I'm trying to say is that, with them dealing with it, and then, seeing that, of course, reminding me of my mom and dad specifically, it was just like, seeing all that, it was like, yeah, no, I totally relate to it. And, these are two human characters that are also like, like Khan, I really feel for this season, especially last season was when we got that one episode with the wedding where like, like we got a little bit of focus into that, but now like we're fully unraveling things where like Khan and Min are like, like it's just the sad notion of like, like it's just not quite the same time and place anymore. We are moving forward a little bit more differently, and Khan this year was like a little bit more like still the same person he is, and I feel like another thing is like I'm getting used to his new voice, which I'm like again, having binged the original 13, I'm like I was so locked into those voices, and now like hearing the revival, it's like it's the sad cadence where like once you get replaced, once someone succeeds you in the role, eventually they'll become as into the role as you thought it was, and this was the season that did it for me. But again, like going to that, like seeing Khan's journey going downwards, and then seeing Min also get affected by it, I think that was the more humane thing to probably like characterize Connie where she is at, to value having a real partner, having someone like Bobby where like, yeah, he is not Laotian, he does not follow Laotian terminology, he respects now everything, considering the fact he's running a Robata Grill restaurant, so he respects all cultures, and it just in general like showcases his growth and everything, which it was always there in him. He just had a little bit of more of a childish way to like focus on it. But like other than that, I think focusing that was great, and then focusing a little bit more on his restaurant crew, the King of the Grill storyline kind of picking up again from season 14. Again, it's like I said, it's all about continuity with the this specific era of the show where, like, everything kind of matters. Like, this episode isn't just a one-off, it's gonna relate when we do come back down the road with it, and I think that's just a wonderful thing that I think they were able to, like, kind of really intimate on it. And but other than that, I mean, like, again, like, we talk about the old and, like, them dealing with some new stuff, with Boomhauer, having kind of like a surrogate son-in-law, stepson, actually, with Luke Jr., and then having that kind of, like, be more sweeter development for the character, like, because, I never expected Boomhauer to settle down, technically speaking. I mean, he's not really settled down per se. I guess it's just like a weird, like, yeah, we're dating, but, like, it's not a cohabitation, but, like, they're around a lot. So I'm like, it's kind of something that, like, at least, like, we're getting more time this year to kind of, to kind of really get more contempt into things with it. And then, just other things, like, that I'm just rapid firing before I get to, like, the standouts, like, Bobby getting AI'd to scam Hank and Peggy, which was, like, that is just so timely. Again, that was a season being produced in 2023 where they weren't even close to AI yet. Now we are. So I'm like, it's just kind of hilarious to know, like, you never know what things are going to turn out to be. You never really know, so to speak. When he went back to Mexico, I forgot to mention that. Just Connie we got a little bit more of the college stuff with her this year, and how Bobby kind of fits into that, even though he's not a college student per se, at least, Peggy going through menopause, which, again, like, that's, again, another thing that I love about King of the Hill is, like, they are able to, like, not take ridiculous scenarios anymore as the focal point. They're taking real things that anyone can go through to make this as realistic as you can be. And I think, I don't even know that. Actually, I don't even know. Is my mother going through menopause? She probably passed it, right? She probably passed it. But the point is that they choose episodes that it just makes sense in a natural approach, and that always was King of the Hill's strength. Like, and I think similar to, like, a little bit more Bob's Burgers nowadays, where, like, it just, these are episodes, storylines that it makes sense. It could happen in the real world, and it's just something that makes it even more relatable as a result. Even if I don't live in Texas, I have a friend that lives in Texas, but I don't live in Texas. But it was just like, it all, like, has a cadence and all has a connection to the show itself and to the viewers of it. And I think that, speaking to that connection, I think finally when we, I think this was just the build up to it, where, like, getting to the final episode of the season, where we finally get to figure out, because, again, that's the one thing that I think that works as the vagueness, and it works as the Hank Hill character. We don't get too much of what the heck happened. Like, like, we've had a brief interaction with Strickland back in the last finale, which I'm debatably wasn't, like, the best episode for me of the season. But seeing, like, why did Hank leave Strickland Purple? Again, like, if you remember characterization, Hank loved Strickland Purple. He loved it. He loved Strickland. He, like, considered him to be his real dad. And the fact that he left and I always thought it was just like an employee transfer program. That was my assumption going into the revival, and then they never addressed that. And then finally getting that episode and, like, doing something that is kind of crazy, where, honestly, like, they did a whole episode where, like, again, before I go any further, the hand-drawn animation, the original tools that they used to make the original run of the show, those are gone. They no longer have access to that. But they actually managed to create almost a near identical representation of the original run. Like, this literally feels like obviously there's still, like, you look at the background, yeah, it's way more detailed than before, but, like, I literally could pass this off as, like, you are bringing back the original run. And honestly, they could do a King of the Hill mini-series of Bobby's high school years, and I would be down for it. I would be so down for it. And that episode where we finally get to kind of get the explanation to, like, why did he leave in the first place? Why did they go to Saudi Arabia? It makes the most sense, I think, for anyone. And I think, honestly, again, I'm not as old as Hank or Peggy or, any of the adult characters. I'm not there. But what I will say is that with that episode specifically, they managed to have a realistic way to explain what the heck happened. We're like, yeah, if you work in a place doing your damn best, being top performer, being the top of the chain for almost 20 years, and you still get passed for manager, then you're never going to be manager. That's never going to come. And the fact that Hank basically quit is the most realistic thing that I ever saw. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I don't blame you. Like, look at this current climate in workplace. Obviously, yeah, if you have a job right now, keep it. But at the same time, it's like, there ain't no such thing. The company don't give a shit about you. Pardon my French again, but like, they don't give a damn. They're like, you can sacrifice 50 years of the company. You can still be an associate. They don't care. It doesn't matter. And it's like, Hank is like, he knows his value. I'm like, that's a good thing, man. And also, Bobby being in BTS, what the heck, man? That was like, again, the timelines, they don't make sense. They don't make sense whatsoever. But either way, like, just seeing that little nibble of like how the show was, just seeing the OG designs again, which we have gotten at times during this run so far, but just seeing it with that filter. Seeing it like this could have been released in 2013, 2014, and it would make sense. It would just fit in right into the category. And it's like, it just feels so weird. It just felt it, and like them weighing their decision and everything, and kind of like Bobby finally figuring out what he wanted to do. Which again, like from that original finale, yeah, he knew he wanted to be in the food game, and now after a few years later, now he's like, I want to be a chef. I want to be a restaurateur. I want to really get into this. Like I know what I want to do, but I need to stay home. I need to stay in Texas, and do all that. And also the little eye to like Luann and Lucky, who are like, again, RIP to their voice actors, but like they're not here, but like they're still felt, and they're still like it's still a largeable, breathable world, even if we don't always get to see that. And then even in the present day, seeing Joe Jack, seeing Enrique, seeing those Strickland propane designs again, like those characters was just a treat. It just very much showcased like how much time has passed and everything, and then realizing like, yeah, like Buck fucked up. He should have picked you as manager. Like Ray Roy's burning the business alive. He's just drunk, burning the money, and there you go. And I always obviously every episode basically showcases Hank is right, and Hank should always be listened to from the get go. Like that's always been the show's cadence. But like Buck finally having to fire his son and having to realize, yeah, the business is where it needs to go. And the ending where like Bobby and where Hank becomes manager at Strickland Propane, and then I'm like, holy shit! Pardon my French again for the last time. Finally, he is manager. He removed these. It took 15 seasons. He's finally a manager. I'm like, this is full circle moment. And yeah, that's kind of where like the revival could have ended. Like we could have ended it. I would have been, give me more. And thank God we're getting more. But like the point is like that finale was a masterpiece, and not to say anything as with like the King of the Grill episode. Not to say anything about again the Ladybird episode. Not trying to say anything about the Bill's Cuddles episode. Bill acting like a dog episode. Like obviously they breath such a fresh cadence with like the new aspects of what makes this revival work. They still were able to kind of make an episode from the original style and that original format while still segueing to what, obviously we are now. And it just worked. It's just like, it just showcases what a mastery that they've crafted their characters. Like we have different eras. Like, we're doing the Taylor Swift era thing. We have different eras of King of the Hill now. And it worked. And it was just a wonderful treat to get to see. And with obviously now we're in a whole new dynamic with the next production season. And I'm just like, I can't wait till next year to like, what is the next thing they're gonna do? How is Hank gonna be now the manager of Strickland Propane? It's just like it's an animated TV show about of the adult genre, but it just works. And it's just like they're fully embracing this is the modern times, but at the same time we're still able to give you that old classic feel that you love from the early 2000s, and it just works so well. And I'm just like, I have nothing but praise because of it. And just like again, the nostalgic baiting, yeah, it's still the highest thing that anyone can do for easy views and clicks. But like here, when you do it right, when you're able to do the balance, where this season continues that balance of just meshing it with the new and the old and still giving you that classic same feel of the show. Now, 20 episodes in, I mean, honestly, this team, I hope they continue for another run. I hope they continue to go a few more years. I want to see more of this revival. Like, I don't want it to overstay its welcome, but I'm just happy at the end of the day with what we've been getting and what we are. And with all that being said, this is definitely worth the binge. I will gladly rewatch it, probably even later this week. Maybe actually not. Maybe next week. But I'm gonna watch this again as soon as I can, just because this was just such a great season, and this was something that honestly, it's gonna go right next to the catalog of just my favorite King of the Hill episodes. Just so many that I've already enjoyed from this season alone is just up there now, and that's just so hard to do. It really, really is, especially when you're comparing to the original. But I loved it. I loved the season. I really, really did. With that being said, yeah, again, it's worth the binge. Go watch it. I don't think I need to be praising it anymore. But let me know down below, what did you think of the 15th season of King of the Hill, the second revival season? Did you love it? Did you love it? Did you like it? Let me know down below. I would love to have a conversation with you about it, as I will always. But I believe that's going to do it for me today, everyone. So if you're unaware, this has been What's the Two from ActionX. I'll give you my review of the 15th season of King of the Hill. If you want to know what we're doing normally, What's the Two besides these seasonal reviews. Nothing in the What's the Two sphere yet. We have a couple things coming out in very slow cadences. We are going to come back next month with Reacher Season 4. So stay tuned for that. We also have our other series after the theater, which has started season 2 with Disney and Pixar's Toy Story 2, which I hope you get to watch and enjoy. I think, as if you love me reviewing TV shows, like movies are also another thing that it's a little bit more different, but it's still the same old Joe that you get to know and love. But if you only care about King of the Hill, I'm going to keep doing this every year. This is a fun treat, just to be able to binge it, talk about it, and then, sign off for the time being. So if you're a King of the Hill fanatic, I hope you're sticking around for the line. I'll see you next year for season 15. No, season 16, my bad. But until then, thank you so much for watching. Please share, like, favorite, share this video if you want to. Ring the bell for when our next video is live. Subscribe if you haven't yet. And also just share the word. It just helps us out around with the algorithm. But again, this has been Joe here from ActionX. Until next time, thank you so much for watching. Please stay safe out there, be good to each other, and as always, peace out.